You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Folks, of course, they had today's impeachment hearings, and so we got some of the video, some of the craziness that happened there. Roll it!
So, Mr. Goldman, let's get to the facts again. During the phone conversation on July 25th with President Zelensky, President Trump was narrowly focusing on his own political survival, using his public office for private and political gain. The truth matters. Then we heard counsel for the Republicans say the president's concerned about foreign aid because you could kiss it goodbye, assuming that's referring to anti-corruption. But let's look at the facts of the July 25th call. I happen to have read it just recently, which sharply illustrates the president's willingness to abuse the power of his office for his own personal benefit. The memorandum of that call is on the screen in front of you, and it shows that President Trump says, and by the way, right after President Zelensky spoke about defense support and the javelins, I would like you to do us a favor, though. So, this is the president's own behavior and words. Mr. Goldman, what was that favor?
The favor was to investigate a debunked conspiracy theory related to Ukraine interference in the 2016 election. And
so, Mr. Goldman, the investigative committees received evidence from multiple witnesses who testified that President Trump was provided specific talking points in preparation for the July 25th call, geared toward protecting the American people's national security. Is that correct?
The talking points certainly were the part of the official U.S. policy, and they included anti-corruption efforts and national security efforts, yes.
And those talking points were provided to help the president effectively communicate official U.S. policy interests during calls with foreign leaders. Is that right?
That is correct. It's a routine process that the National Security Council does, but the president generally is able to use them or not use them. Witnesses said the president's not required to use them. What was so startling here is that he not only veered off from them, but that he went to his own personal interests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to get us back to the undisputed facts of the president's abuse of power. Mr. Goldman, as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, when you prosecuted drug conspiracy cases, was it standard practice for drug kingpins to try to beat the case by distancing themselves from the conspiracy and blaming their accomplices for the crime?
All the time. Conspiracies have different layers, and the top layers make the bottom layers do the work so that they're further removed from the actual conduct.
Okay. I'd like to ask some questions about the president's role in what Ambassador Bolton referred to as a drug deal. Did the testimony and evidence compiled by the Intelligence Committee establish the fact that, with respect to Ukraine, Rudy Giuliani was at all times working on behalf of President Trump?
Yes, Mr. Giuliani said that. President Trump said that to a number of other individuals. And then those individuals, Ambassador Sondland, Ambassador Volker, also said that.
Thank you. And on May 9th, 2019, Rudy Giuliani, on behalf of his client, President Trump, spoke with a New York Times reporter about his planned trip to Ukraine. And on that trip, he planned to meet with President Zelensky, he said, and urged him to pursue investigations relating to the Bidens and to the debunked theory that Ukraine and not Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
And Mr. Giuliani told the reporter that his trip was not about official U.S. foreign policy and that the information he sought would be very, very helpful to his client, meaning it would be helpful to President Trump. Is that correct?
Yes, and if it's not official foreign policy, it would be helpful to President Trump's personal interests.
That's correct. And there is no doubt, Mr. Goldman, that investigations of the Bidens and the 2016 election meddling were, in fact, not about U.S. policy, but were about benefiting Trump's reelection, correct?
Yes, and even the Ukrainians realize that.
Let's focus on the aid to Ukraine. Mr. Goldman, Congress allocated on a bipartisan basis $391 million in military aid to the Ukraine. Is that correct?
Yes, and it was signed by President Trump into law.
Does the record establish that the military aid to Ukraine is in the national security interests of the United States?
Absolutely.
The investigation concluded that President Trump compromised U.S. national security by withholding vital military assistance and diplomatic support. Is that true?
Yes.
President Trump and his defenders claim that he withheld military aid out of alleged concern with corruption in Ukraine. Let's explore this phony justification. Donald Trump first spoke to the president of Ukraine on an April 21st call, correct?
That's right.
President Trump never used the word corruption on that April 21st call, true?
That is true, and the readout from the White House after the call did say that President Trump talked about corruption.
That readout was inaccurate. In a May 23rd letter, Trump's Department of Defense concluded that Ukraine met the anti-corruption benchmarks required to receive military aid from the United States, true?
Yes, and if I could just take a second to talk about that, because that's very important, and this goes back to what Mr. Collins was talking about with Vice President Biden. There is absolutely conditionality on aid routinely in all sorts of different ways, but it's done through official policy. And these anti-corruption benchmarks that you're referencing here was a condition of Ukraine getting the aid. But in May, the Department of Defense, in conjunction with the other interagencies, certified that Ukraine was making the necessary progress on anti-corruption efforts to merit the aid.
And yet the aid was not released, correct?
The aid was subsequently held. It was supposed to be released. DOD announced the release, and then President Trump held the aid without explanation.
Mr. Goldman, based on the evidence and testimony that you have reviewed, is there any reason to believe that the president cared about corruption in Ukraine?
No, the evidence really supports the fact that President Trump views corruption in Ukraine to be synonymous with the two investigations that he wants.
But what the president did care about was a political favor from the Ukrainian government, and that is why he withheld the military aid. True?
That he told Ambassador Sondland himself that is the only thing that he cares about.
All right, y'all. Anybody else just find the Republicans pitiful? First, they open up 3 seconds in. They start interrupting Nadler, trying to throw monkey wrench into it. I mean, all kind of stuff. I mean, and it's pretty sad to sit here and watch and try to say, well, no, you didn't investigate this. It's beyond. They will literally, when Trump said, I could kill somebody on Fifth Avenue and my supporters not care, they proven it.
Absolutely.
They're proving it. I'm when all this is done and when his ass is thrown out next year, none of them will be able to have any credibility or any criticism. Lindsey Graham, all of them, for the next president. Not now, white, conservative, evangelical. Better come at me and open their mouth with morality and character and values after what they, none of them. I'm going to sit back. This was going to happen. They're going to say something. I'm just going to have some baby powder on my hands. It's going to, or a fly swatter. Just swat. Because it is clear and undeniable. And they are like, no, the sky is absolutely purple.
Yeah.
You know, in spite of mounting evidence that shows there is grounds for impeachment, we have to look at ultimately what are we trying to accomplish, or what the Democrats are trying to accomplish, right? The Democrats essentially are trying to impeach the president, which I think will happen in the House. But ultimately, based on our Constitution, the Senate has to do its part. And under the leadership of Mitch McConnell, I just don't see that happening.
Okay, but
I just don't see a conviction.
But hold on. One,
I don't see that.
But that has nothing to do with the other.
Right.
So, for instance,
But you need a conviction, though. In
no,
the Senate
no,
after that.
no. That is incorrect. Let's be clear here.
He's not being removed.
Yeah.
There are two chambers.
Because the ultimate goal is to get him removed. That's
No,
the ultimate
no,
goal.
no. The ultimate goal is to hold him accountable. Let's be okay. Here's the problem, and there've been some Democrats who's Nancy Pelosi. That was her initial logic.
Yep.
Here's the problem with that. Facts are facts. Democrats right now control the House. Republicans control the Senate. Democrats have passed more than 300 bills. They just passed H.R. 4 dealing with the Voting Rights Act. They passed more than
So many.
Huh?
So many bills.
No,
Yeah.
but they passed
Right.
300 bills. McConnell hasn't done. So if I use that logic, well, it's a waste of time passing a bill. No. The House, according to the Constitution, has its duty. The Senate has their duty. In the history of this country, there have been only 4. This is the 4th impeachment inquiry. Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, and now Trump. Johnson survived conviction by 1 vote in the Senate. Impeached in the House, survived conviction. Nixon resigned before there was ever an impeachment vote in the House. Clinton, impeached in the House, survived conviction in the Senate. So the reality is, in the history of America, no president has actually been thrown out. But it does not mean the House still does not do its job. He has to be held accountable for what he's doing because, Avis, he will do it again.
Absolutely, he will do it again. I mean,
So even if the Senate does not convict, the House still must do its job.
absolutely.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. As the marijuana momentum continues, our good friends at marijuanastock.org have already reached more than half of their funding goal for the hemp CBD investment. If you want to take advantage of the great opportunity, you need to do it now because it won't last much longer. And of course, I'm talking about the hemp plant, the good cousin to marijuana, with a much higher concentration of CBD. That means hemp gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Also, if you don't know, hemp farming is now legal in the United States, creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. Folks, it's an opportunity for you to invest. And that's where the folks at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and leases it to licensed high-paying tenants. They're essentially hemp CBD landlords, so you could get in on the action. Now, hemp continues to change the economic landscape. 420 Real Estate is allowing you to chase the American dream. You can invest as little as $200 up to $10,000 as part of their crowdfunding campaign. And you must do it, of course, before the fund is closed. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. Get in the game and get in the game now. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.